Hey everyone, Jeep looks a bit different. We finally got it in paint, and today I'm going to show you how we got there. Okay, hey everybody, welcome back. So, I know it has been quite a while, like I said in the intro, since we've seen any movement on this project, but winter hit and I just got super lazy, and that's just the reality of it. This sanding on this thing is mind-numbingly boring, and when it's cold and dark, I just didn't want to do it. And so I drug out the sanding process a lot longer than I thought I was going to, but here we are. Now, we've got everything out of the garage, getting ready to spray, and I kind of wanted to run you guys through what I've got, what my plans are, and how I set everything up for this. I watched a ton of YouTube videos. If you're watching this, you've probably watched some of the other ones too, if you're getting ready to paint. And so I've painted before. This is gonna be the third or fourth vehicle I've painted, but this is, I think, the best setup I've ever had for it, from both a space perspective and an equipment perspective. So let me just run you through everything. So to get ready to shoot this, I had previously used this little 30-gallon compressor here with the other vehicles that I'd shot. And it was fine, it just ran constantly. And in this heat and humidity down here in Alabama, I was doing some sanding body work on this one, and with the DA sander, it would just pull moisture and I was shooting water out the end. And so I didn't want that to happen as I was getting ready to paint, so I went ahead and upgraded to a 60-gallon unit and went and installed these hard lines here in kind of a zigzag pattern. There's a bunch of videos on the internet about this, but basically the thought is that hopefully as the hot air goes in here and condenses and picks up moisture, as it runs through these lines, it'll be able to cool, and I'll be able to dump the moisture there before it makes its way up, over and across to where I'll tap into my final airline at over there. So that was one of the projects I had to do to get ready for this. Had some work to do on the 69 Bronco to get the doors operational, everything, so I could clear it out of here. Again, just minor stuff that really drugged this out longer than it should have, but here we are. So let's run through the equipment and stuff that I've got here, getting ready to shoot. So what this is I'd gone to my local supply store, talked to them, and it was more than I was looking to spend on a garage paint job, right? If I was gonna do a show quality job and I had a booth and everything like that, I would invest a little bit more in product. But from everything I read about the reviews for this stuff, everybody says it shoots well, everybody says it was good stuff. So I went to the coating store and got this Urochem stuff. So I'm gonna start with this 2K urethane primer sealer in a medium gray. And talking to the lady there, that'll give me the most factory base to start with. So we're gonna take that, shoot everything so we're in one uniform color. Because as you look, you know, I've popped through a few places from the urethane coat down to the epoxy primer. And it's just kind of got a bunch of different spots and specs on it. And so let's get everything back to one uniform color. So we'll start with that. Then we're gonna move over to the base coat. And I've decided that I'm gonna shoot this in boxwood green. Went ahead and dipped it. That's a little darker than I was expecting it to be, but I'm thinking that maybe when I put it under this clear coat, it'll lighten up a little bit. And so I went with their Glamour Clear. There's two stages of clear, or two levels of clear coat you can do. This is the one they said is gonna give you a little bit deeper, richer shine. And it said it's a little bit easier to spray because it's a little bit thicker. And so I went with, they sell gallon kits, and then I added a quart to both of those, just so I can make sure that I don't run short, right? This is a big vehicle, so we're shooting, I mean, lots of acreage here on this, the body, and I would rather spend the extra 150 bucks, have a little bit more, and have some left for touch-ups or anything else if I need it, than run out and have a panel that's light or be struggling at the end trying to figure out what the hell I'm gonna do. So that's gonna be what we're looking at for the main body here. The body breaking up, if you've watched my other video, you guys know I like Raptor Liner. And so we're gonna shoot Raptor Liner in this tinted GM white from the body line up. So basically from right there, we're gonna do that pillar and the top in that Raptor Liner. Two reasons. One, pure laziness. I did not want to do body work on the roof of this thing because you're never gonna see it, and I mean, realistically, it just gets beat on by the sun and whatever you're gonna throw up there. It has the roof rack, if you remember. So I went ahead and thought to myself, let's just make life easy. I wanna do a two-tone anyways. We'll do the Raptor Liner. That way, if I huck luggage or whatever up there that I'm hauling, I don't gotta worry about being gentle with the paint. And so that is the overall plan for what we're gonna do with this. As you can see, I'm right in the middle of taping, getting ready to, kind of make sure everything's masked off. I need to move in here and back tape everything. So there's still a lot more work to do. I'm not gonna bore you guys with that. The paint booth. So as you can see, I've kind of got this full Dexter setup going. I got painter's drop cloth that I use, and it's this right here. So clear 12 feet by 400 feet. So 12 feet gives me a ton of drape. Now it's very thin, and so as I'm stapling it to the ceiling, you can look here, right, I have it kind of rolled up to make it a little bit thicker so there's some bite to it. And then it gives me still plenty of drape to come down and make sure everything's protected. The fans and light, I got my 360 light. I make sure I try to keep as many lights inside as possible, but the plan for this fan, as you can see, I kind of notched this out here, and I'm gonna put a air filter in that with the fan here blowing air out. I am fortunate enough to have an AC, which is gonna be bringing me air in. And then over here, I'm gonna do another box fan and filter to filter out. And so that should be hopefully enough ventilation to keep me from dying in here. But just in case, I've got a full respirator mask, headscarves, a Tyvek suit. Hopefully my big ass fits in that. Now, one of the things I did spring for and invest for this one, I've used crappy guns in the past, just your kind of Harbor Freight specials, and I decided to spring for a little bit nicer gun on this one. So this is a 3M AccuSpray system, and I mean, this thing is super light. This is a composite body, but the really cool thing about this, and the reason I got this, is it allows you to quick change between everything. And so, essentially, it has these nozzles here. So it'll come with these nozzles. Let me pop one of these out. It comes with these nozzles, right? And essentially, this is gonna pop onto the front of the gun here. And then that's gonna allow me to quick change, right? This whole assembly. So this is the only thing that paint's gonna go through. And so you have these cups and liners that kind of screw on and drop into this. And then between shooting the primer sealer, the base, and the clear, I won't have to clean this gun at all. And so that's gonna make things, very speedy, especially when you're dealing with flash times in the 15 to 30 minute range, like some of these. I think between the primer sealer and the base coat's an hour, but everything else, right, between the base coat and the clear, that's a 30-minute flash time on that. And so rather than having to clean the gun and go through all that nonsense, I figured it'd be better to just invest in this. It was a little spendy, I think 300 and something, maybe $400, but it's got this 200 micron filter in here, these liners that are gonna go in, the cup itself, and then once everything's together, it should be, easy on, easy off. That way I can have, 3 of these ready to go, mix up my paint, spray, flash, spray, flash, spray, flash, and be able to move really quickly through this job. At least that's the hope. So I'm trying to get all of this shot in one day. That's what they said at the coating store. That's what all the tech specs, they send the tech sheets with these. And it gives you the flash and dry times at 75 degrees. Oh, if you guys are doing this, and I'm sure you've looked at this, but make sure you get the right activators and reducers for the temperatures you're gonna be shooting in. So I'm trying to rush and beat the weather because these activators and reducers I've got are only good up to 90 degrees. And so we're flirting with the 90s here. We're in the mid 80s. Right now it's May, so I'm trying to hurry and get this in. But that's why I've got everything ready to go. I'm waiting for one good day of low wind, low humidity, and good sunshine, which I think is Wednesday this week. And so I'm just gonna try to make sure all my ducks are in a row and everything's ready to go, so when it is and the window hits, I can just shoot and be done. So that's kind of the rundown of where we're at here with this. Like I I guess there's nothing to do now but get into spraying it. Okay, so shooting day is here and we have absolutely perfect weather for this. The storms came through last night and luckily we missed the brunt of it. Hopefully everybody's okay. I've talked to everybody, there's some damage, but for the most part, everybody I know made through unscathed. But what that has left us with 70-degree weather and almost no humidity and no wind. So I'm super excited about the weather today. We're almost ready. I got to clear out the last few bits of nonsense from here to really clean up my space, but I've got my mixing station set up back here. We'll get everything moved over and staged. And then I've got everything taped. And so I went through and I back taped everything. This is all taped from the inside to allow me to still shoot these edges here, which was a bit of a pain in the ass. I love being big until it's time to do something that requires me to contort and get in a certain space. And then it's a real pain in the ass. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna shoot everything in this primer coat. Like I said, we're going white on the top, but I'm gonna shoot everything in this primer coat. And then I'm gonna have to sand that down with 200 grit anyways. But so leaving the top open so we can shoot, not worrying about overspray. Got my platform ready. Like I said, some last things to clean out of the way, and then do one final wipe down with the tack cloth. I've already wiped everything down with the wax and grease remover. And then we'll get all PP'd up and we'll get ready to shoot. So once you've got everything out of the way and out of your garage, you're done kicking up dust, the last thing you're gonna wanna do is grab one of these tack cloths and just give everything a final wipe down, right? You should have already done your wax and grease remover, everything out of the way, and this is just to get those last few nibs and bits, off the panel to try to keep it out of the paint. You see there's not a ton on this rag, so this really should be just the last little bit that you're taking off to get that final step before you're ready to spray. So make sure you take the time to thoroughly mix your paint. There's going to be a lot of solids in the bottom, especially on something like this primer. And then one of the best things I invested in was this pour top here. I went to Lowe's and there's just these silicone pour tops that allow you to control the flow. And when you're trying to mix precisely in these cups, it really does make it a lot easier if you can not be fighting, the splash that's coming in. So we put the primer in with this activator. Give it a good mix. I think there's a little reducer. I hate these jugs. They pour terrible. You can see me making a mess all over this. I need to figure out the secret to making that pour. But once I get everything in there in the proper ratios, you go ahead and give it a mix, get the liner in the cup, and then pour it through a filter. Make sure you strain out any of those last little bits that might have been contaminated in the paint or on the stir stick, so you're not spraying that or clogging up your gun. Then you twist on the top. Go ahead and lock the canister onto the body here. This took me a minute, but there's a very simple locking system once you figure it out, and then you're ready to spray. So with these HVLP guns, dialing in your pressure is key. And so you see I have the regulator on the body, but I also have one in line, and I'm starting on these low consequence areas of the doors, right? The jams and things like that, where I can take a second to dial it in before I get to the actual body panel here. That's going to be a little more high consequence if the gun settings are wrong. So it takes me a little while to fiddle with it and get it dialed in, but once I do, I mean, this gun sprays amazing. I think I say that later in the video. I think of the things that I invested in for this shoot, this gun is one of the ones I would highly recommend. The compressor would be the other. I mean, the compressor is probably the most important part of this to make sure you have enough volume. But as you can see after this first coat, everything went down smooth. It looks uniform and even, not a ton of grain or run in it, and so I'm super happy with how this first coat went down. Like I said, good wet coats, enough coverage, so really, really happy with this first coat. Whoa. Okay, so let me get this headstock off. All right, so we're done with the sealer, and I think it turned out pretty well. So now we've got everything in a good uniform color and coat. We got to give this an hour to flash. So what time is it? 8:52 right now. So we'll come back in here about 10 o'clock and start shooting color. Letting the garage air out a little bit, got the doors open. Thank God there's no wind, but it all went on pretty easy. It took me about half a coat to get my gun dialed in the exact way I wanted it. But once I got it dialed in, man, it was shooting beautiful. So I'm really happy with how this went down. Like I said, everything looks good and uniform. No runs. I did 2 coats on most everything and then 3 on the hood and doors because I'll see a little bit more abuse than say the tailgate will or the top up there. It's gonna get covered anyways. But the cool thing about this is now that I'm done, you just pull this whole setup off of the gun, right? It detaches from the front here. You just pull the whole thing off, and now the only thing I needed to clean was this needle. And we'll switch back in for the next one. I'll pull out a whole new setup here, put it on. I gotta save the sleeve container, but other than that, everything here, like I said, just pulls out. Whoop. Just pulls out, and that goes right in the trash. Same thing with these cups. Boom. And we are done and ready to paint the next round. So like I said, we're gonna give it about an hour flash time. So I go here, and I got my cheat sheet, 1 hour to top coat. And then once we come in, we'll put the 1.4 tip back on. Go ahead and three to four coats at medium, 50% overlap at a 2-to-1 mix ratio. So we'll check back in about an hour once this is all set up, and we'll start shooting color. So I'm going to start with the quart here because I want to leave the gallon to do the last couple coats and make sure the color's uniform, and that way I don't have to mix the quart with the gallon. So I get everything mixed up here, and then I'm going to put it in the gun, and I'm going to do 1 test spray on this drop cloth here, just to make sure there's no spit or spatter in the gun, and before I start shooting the panels. And then I'm going to again start with the low consequence areas of the door jambs in case there's any more fine tuning or dialing that needs to be done with this gun. And so I had it pretty happy, pretty good set from the last one, and it sprayed very well with this color. So get around, start onto the panels, and just start with the light coat for the first one. I'll go heavier on the subsequent coats, but for this first one, I just want to make sure there's no runs. So I'm not trying to chase anything out of these panels, just get something on there, get some good coverage. Now I want to talk about cord management. You're going to see me flip this over my shoulder here. The mistake I make almost every time I paint is I let my cord hit the paint. So make sure you've got a good handle on this cord, wrap it around your body, keep it somewhere where you're not going to accidentally dip it into a panel and then have to be chasing that out, because there's nothing more frustrating than putting your cord into a panel and looking back and seeing a big smear mark across the paint. So getting this initial coverage down, this first coat went down easy, and I think, very happy with how everything went down. I was getting roughly 40% coverage out of one of the containers of paint. And so, I'd spray, mix, but it all went relatively quick, and happy with this first coat. As you're spraying, make sure you have a mental checklist or a physical checklist, because you see here I go back to shoot this cowl. I almost forgot it, and I had to go back on my second coat and catch it. So I almost didn't paint that, and that would have really made me upset if I looked back and that was in primer still before, once I was done with the color coding. Okay, so we still got, looks like about 15 minutes before we can shoot the clear. It's still flashing, but I let it air out a little bit, and here's where we're at. Everything's looking really good. I'm really happy with the coverage. I'm not seeing any spots that I missed or went light coverage on. I've been looking over everything. I got the flashlight out and took a peek, and so far pretty happy. There are a couple spots where flies have kind of got into, or like a little gnat or something like that. I'm gonna try to dig those out before we shoot the clear. But like I said, all in all, good coverage. Really happy with how this is going on. Now, I ordered a gallon and a quart, and I forgot that I'm not shooting the underside of the hood or the roof up there. And so I think I could have probably got away with a gallon since I'm not doing those. But I'd rather have extra and have plenty for down the road. Oh, the other thing I didn't do is the inside of this tailgate yet. So that'll eat up a little bit more. And then that leaves me plenty of leftover to spray any interior components we want to do. Anything that, we want to do as accents, anything like that. If I want to get crazy and do the wheels in a color match inlay, we can do that. And so I think, like I said, a gallon and a quart is a bit much for not spraying this, but if you're doing the whole thing, if you got a Wagoneer that you're doing the whole thing on, one color, I would do 1.25 gallons for sure. And I think that'll leave you plenty to spray. And so I'm gonna let this air out for another 10 minutes or so. That mask, invest in a good mask. That one is not a good mask, and I can feel myself getting lightheaded towards the end of that shoot. But you know, we're in the home stretch now. All we got to do is not mess up this clear, you know, knock on wood, and we'll be good to go. So we'll get back in here in about 10 minutes, mix the clear, and start shooting. And I jinxed myself because I did mess up the clear. I was mixing it up here, and everything went fine. But on one of the coats, you know, as you see me trying to get this lid tightened down, I did not tighten the lid all the way, and there was a drip. So there's a couple panels that, you know, I was spraying the door on these 2 doors here. It took me those 2 doors to catch that the lid was not on completely tight, and there was a couple drips in those panels. So I'm gonna have to go back and get those out. But then in the subsequent coats, this sprayed very nice. But it's one of those things, once it's already there, it's in the panel, and you just gotta kind of deal with it and think about how you're gonna fix it on the back end. Clear coat went on super smooth, very easy to spray. I was very happy with the suggestion to go with this Glamour Clear. Whew, okay, and like that, we are done. These fumes are still clearing out of here, so I've got everything open. Nice little breeze coming through now to kind of clear everything out. But, I mean, if you can look, I got 4 good coats on this, on the whole body. So 4 good coats of clear. It looks like it does have a little bit of a peel to it now. I'm hoping that settles and evens out as it dries. But I mean, good high gloss to it as you're looking at it. Plenty of sheen. I think this will buff out very nicely. I think, you know, there's going to be some cutting and buffing to be done on it for sure. But, you know, overall good coverage. Like I said, with the base coat, I went a little more clear than I needed. I used the quart and then maybe half of the gallon. But I mean, like I said, good gloss to it, good sheen. We'll let it dry up and see how she looks. But overall, that was not a bad process. We started, I think, at somewhere around 7:30 this morning, and it's 1:15 now. So all in six-ish hours to get it done. Not bad. Compressor worked out phenomenal. Cycled on, cycled off, so it wasn't constantly running. So 60 gallons was certainly the smart move on that. So now all I've got to do is let this cure up, and then we'll get to shooting the top. Okay, so it's been 2 days since we laid down the base and clear, and now it is time to shoot the Raptor Liner. So what we got to do is, well, I've got everything taped off already. Just basically put a big bag over all the fresh paint, creating the lines where I want the Raptor Liner to, you know, stop. So we're just gonna do the upper half of this. So it's gonna be all white up top. I've got everything else bagged because the last thing I want is any overspray that's gonna make wet sanding any harder. And so now just gonna do a quick knockdown with 220 grit on this, you know, just to rough it up, to give it something mechanical to bite onto as we spray the Raptor Liner. Then we'll get it mixed up and we'll start spraying. Should be a quick day today. God, hopefully knock on wood. And then we'll be done with this portion, and then it's time for the hours and hours of wet sanding. But we'll do that in a whole different video. So as you're sanding this, remember, you're not trying to get the metal, you're just trying to give it a scuff and something to bite onto. So be gentle with it, blow it off, wipe it down, and it should be a quick prep to get ready to shoot. Okay, so now that we have it wiped down, blown off, wax and grease taken care of, the last thing you're gonna wanna do is you're gonna wanna make sure you've got any holes that you're gonna need later, like for this roof rack up here, protected. So I just stuck some tape down in them with a little tab so I can go back and pull them later. That way you're not hunting for them when it comes time to put the roof rack or whatever accessory you're gonna be putting back on. I did the same thing with the lizard skin on the inside. It just makes life so much easier on the back end of this rather than having to like poke and hope you find the right soft spot rather than drilling a new hole in your roof or whatever. So now that we've got that, we're gonna go ahead and get this mixed up. So I've got this Raptor Tintable coating. I'm gonna shoot this GM white. Now, this tintable base comes as just a hyper white. It's super bright white. And I think that would look pretty good with this green, but I wanna tint it down just a little bit just so it's not such a stark contrast, and also so I don't have to worry about cleaning it as often. If I put just a little bit of a cream tint to it, I think that'll make it to where when a little bit of dust and dirt gets on it, it won't be so noticeable down in those crevices. I'm gonna try to spray this as smooth as possible. There's a way you can, drop pressure and shoot from a distance to hopefully even out the top coat. So I'm looking for as smooth as I can get on this one, but I've never shot this really smooth, so we'll see how it goes. So let's go ahead and get it mixed up. Now that everything's taped off, wiped down, we can go ahead and shoot. And then I think it's 2 coats, an hour between each, and we'll be done with this.
So they give you a little mixing cup to make sure you hit 8 ounces into each of these containers, and then the paint, the dye, unfortunately comes in a larger container, so you got to split it between the two. But it mixes up pretty easy. Make sure you have your PPE on because this is going to go everywhere. And then, this first coat, I make the huge mistake of going too heavy in portions of it. I burn through this first bottle very quickly, and then I have to adjust in the second bottle.
Okay, so here we are after coat 1. I got a little cocky on this one. I thought that this would cover a lot more than it did. I forgot how big this roof is, and so I went heavy back here in my first section, and you saw I ran out by about here. So I shot a little more sparingly through here to keep this first coat not quite as dense throughout the rest of it. And so when I go back, I'm gonna have to make sure as I come through and spray through here, you can see how sparse the coverage is up through here. So as I come back there, man, you can see good solid coverage over there. So on the second coat, when I come back through, we will we'll start on this side. We'll make sure we get all this good and covered, because like I said, my first coat was so heavy over there. You can see from about right there back, that first coat, how heavy that was, and then how light I had to go through here. But we'll make up for that in the second coat. So we'll start this side on the second coat, make sure we got good coverage of everything, and then we should, but 4 bottles, man, I thought 4 bottles would be more than enough. But I guess this is the equivalent of a truck bed. If you look at it, I mean, it's a pretty expansive piece of real estate. And so, but we'll get it done. Wait for an hour. So see, it's about 10 o'clock now. We'll be back out here at 11, and then we'll shoot these next 2 bottles, which should go equally as quick. I think shooting that all in all took maybe 10 minutes. Mixing it actually took longer, and then we'll be done. And then we can untape everything and roll this thing out in the sunlight and see how it looks.
So like I said, I'm starting the second coat on the passenger side just to make sure I can get the coverage that I need in those areas where I had to go a little bit lighter. And so, making sure, obviously the visible areas get good coverage, but you also don't want to skimp on the areas you're not going to see, because I'm putting this on for protection. I want to make sure that, I get good coverage. So I'm being a little smarter with how I shoot this and how thick I go to make sure I get good coverage all the way across. But also I wanted to mention, this is a rollable product, right? If you don't have the means to spray, you can roll, and it'll protect equally as well from what I've heard. And here's the final product. I didn't get a chance to take it out in the sunlight because weather rolled back in. It's been raining here for the last few days, but as you can see, high gloss, but there are some imperfections in the paint. You can see in the reflections there that there's some orange peel, there's some nibs, there's some things I'm gonna have to go through and take care of. But overall, I am very happy with how this turned out. I think you always expect to have to take care of some work on the back end of a paint job, and we'll get through it on this one. That's going to be the next video. I've got a few methods I'm going to compare of how to smooth this paint out as much as possible, but sorry this video took so long. Like I said, the winter months kind of got to me, but now I'm ready and excited to get this thing rolling again. So thanks for checking it out, and we'll see you guys in the next video.